You think the Great Depression meant empty plates and tasteless gruel? Think again. Our ancestors stretched pennies into feasts, turning scraps and imagination into meals that kept families alive through America's darkest decade. Let's dig into 60 cheap 1930s dishes our ancestors ate to survive. When food was scarce, nothing went to waste, and the leftover bean sandwich is the perfect example of how resourceful families could be. Whether you had baked beans, pintos, or navy beans left from a previous meal, they made the perfect filling for a sandwich. The beans were mashed up and spread between slices of bread, turning them into a hearty meal that was both filling and cost-effective. While onions could be added for a little extra flavor, this sandwich was great in its simplest form. It didn't require any fancy ingredients, just what you had left in the fridge. The beans added protein and substance, making it a satisfying meal that could get you through a long day. This sandwich wasn't about perfection. It was about making the most of what you had and turning leftovers into something practical. It was the kind of meal that didn't need much to make it taste good. So, while leftover beans might not have been the highlight of the dinner table, they certainly played an important role when it came time to put together a quick lunch or snack. But if you think beans on bread are a clever solution, the next sandwich might just have you rethinking your idea of what makes a satisfying meal. Elvis did not invent the grilled peanut butter and banana sandwich, but he sure made it famous. This was a sandwich with soul. It started simple: 2 slices of soft white bread, a thick slather of peanut butter, and banana slices lined up like records on a shelf. Then, just when you thought it was done, someone threw it on a griddle with butter until it crisped and caramelized into something magical. The peanut butter melted, the banana got warm and gooey, and the outside toasted to golden brown perfection. It was sweet, salty, sticky, and just a little over the top, like every good memory from a Saturday morning. Whether you were 5 or 50, this sandwich hit all the right notes. Some people added honey, others tossed in bacon, and a few adventurous souls even threw in some cinnamon. But the classic version stood tall, proud, and a little indulgent. It was the kind of sandwich your aunt made when she wanted to spoil you without breaking the bank. It filled you up, slowed you down, and made you feel like life was okay, if only for a moment. But if you thought Elvis had taste, wait until you see what happens when Spam and pineapple get tossed into the same sandwich and actually make sense. Spam and pineapple. No one does comfort food better than Americans, and the iconic potato chips and cheese sandwich is proof. People would grab cheddar or mozzarella cheese and a packet of Frito-Lays or a can of Pringles and get busy at the table but not in the kitchen. Reason being, this was one of those 10-minute dishes that took absolutely no effort or time to make, like instant noodles. Barbecue-flavored chips would be preferred, because they added a secondary flavor, but all kinds were used and the crunch was just to die for. In the 1970s, chips like Pringles were getting more and more popular in America, and that made it even easier for this to take center stage. What would follow in the decades after was a growing concern for health, and people stopped making their favorite potato chips and cheese sandwiches, but we would love a 70s plate. When Depression-era households craved ham sandwiches but found their wallets emptier than the pantry, cooks turned to an inventive stand-in: the mock ham sandwich, cleverly crafted from slices of canned luncheon meat, seasoned and fried to taste surprisingly like ham. Luncheon meat, an affordable, shelf-stable canned pork product, quickly became essential in kitchens during the economic struggles of the 1930s. Initially viewed skeptically, homemakers discovered that a little ingenuity with seasoning could convincingly transform canned meat into a delicious ham substitute, saving both pride and pennies. Seasoned lightly with brown sugar or cloves, then crisped in a skillet, this economical alternative provided families the illusion of a savory deli sandwich even when the nearest delicatessen was financially unreachable. Historical cookbooks and newspaper columns enthusiastically promoted luncheon meat as a reliable budget saver, humorously advising cooks to season liberally, since anything tastes better fried. Remarkably, luncheon meat surged in popularity during the Depression precisely because it was both accessible and adaptable, often distributed widely as government aid. Long before Irish coffee graced brunch menus, Depression-era Americans navigated the dry years of Prohibition by quietly spiking their mugs with homemade liquor, blending two beloved national pastimes into one rebellious concoction: coffee mixed with alcohol. This clandestine cocktail wasn't exactly advertised in Ladies' Home Journal, yet it became a common workaround, disguising illicit moonshine or bootleg whiskey in plain sight during breakfast, proving caffeine was useful for more than just waking up. Preparation was straightforward, though rarely discussed openly. Strong coffee masked the questionable taste of illegal moonshine or bathtub gin, resulting in an eye-opening beverage that delivered both caffeine jitters and an illegal buzz. Newspapers occasionally joked that Prohibition turned average coffee drinkers into accidental outlaws, sipping discreetly to avoid suspicious neighbors or nosy officers. While Prohibition officially ended in 1933, mixing alcohol and coffee never disappeared entirely. It just became legally and socially acceptable again, minus the secrecy. Interestingly, modern laws now regulate alcoholic caffeine mixtures strictly due to legitimate health concerns. Excessive caffeine masks alcohol's intoxicating effects, increasing risky behaviors and health dangers. Onion sandwiches were a really simple meal that worked perfectly as a Depression-era breakfast. Red onions, green onions, normal ones, anything that people could get their hands on worked. Onions were also really filling thanks to the incredible amount of flavor they come with, and if you bother with caramelizing them and using a few scraps of leftover meat or pig parts, then you actually have yourself an almost solid meal. Raw onions have a pretty pungent taste, but people used to eat sandwiches filled with those too. People found themselves eating all kinds of meals that pretty much just extended their pantry as much as possible. The taste, flavor, and how good it felt, all of that wasn't even the third or fourth priority. Onion sandwiches are also pretty self-explanatory. There's not a lot to go over with this dish, but it is interesting how people adopted practices from other cultures. For example, in Southeast Asian communities in America, it was very common to consume raw onions with curries and bread or carbs. Vinegar Club sandwich was never shy about making an entrance. This was the sandwich equivalent of wearing a tuxedo to a barbecue. Triple layered, cut diagonally, and always served with a cocktail toothpick jabbed right through the middle like a victory flag, the classic clubhouse was a masterclass in controlled chaos. You had turkey, ham, and bacon stacked with lettuce, tomato, and mayonnaise on white toast, then doubled up like it had something to prove. One bite, and you got the salty crunch of bacon, the cool snap of lettuce, the savory chew of ham, and that creamy mayo keeping everything glued together. It was tall. It was filling. It was an edible tower of American lunch pride. You could find it at diners, roadside motels, airport cafes, and your Aunt Linda's house on a Sunday afternoon. No one ever finished a club sandwich without looking like they'd just solved a puzzle. Picking it up was half the battle. Eating it cleanly? Impossible. But satisfying? Always. This was the sandwich you ordered when you wanted to feel like you were doing something important. And while this one wore its sandwich royalty crown proudly, the next one took a completely different route, turning cheap lunch meat into the closest thing we ever got to pizza on a bun. Now, sardine and mustard sandwiches are as basic as they sound and much better than you might initially give them credit for. Be realistic and think about a post-Depression era America where a lot of neighborhoods and homes were still reeling from the effects. Dollars could buy a bit more and went back to their usual strength, but everything was a bit touch and go for a while, and dishes like sardine and mustard sandwiches were the cure. Even more attractive than the taste was the price of this beauty, because for about $1.50 you had yourself a solid meal. Many labor workers, like your friendly neighborhood forklift or dock workers, might remember eating these during their lunch breaks. People would usually spice it up with other vegetables, toppings, and peppers to make a proper feast out of a cheap thrill. And we would like to join the fun too. Olives in Depression-era kitchens, nothing green escaped the resourceful eye of American homemakers, not even celery leaves, the unsung heroes at the top of the stalk. These leafy leftovers starred in the celery leaf sandwich, a sandwich created by chopping tender celery greens, lightly salting them, and buttering them generously between slices of bread. Today, most cooks casually discard celery leaves without a second thought. But during the 1930s, throwing away anything edible felt as reckless as burning dollar bills. Celery itself was inexpensive and readily available, often grown at home or bought cheaply at markets. However, the leaves offered a frugal bonus, rich in nutrients and flavor. Savvy cooks of the Depression recognized celery leaves had a slightly peppery taste, perfect for transforming plain bread into something fresh-tasting and surprisingly elegant. Historical home economics columns humorously urged housewives never to waste celery leaves, suggesting that to do so would mean missing out on a luxury sandwich costing mere pennies. Indeed, celery leaf sandwiches earned a reputation as budget-friendly sophistication, making appearances at ladies' luncheons where no one dared reveal the secret ingredient came straight from vegetable trimmings. While city rats today might prompt a frantic call to pest control, desperate times during the Great Depression transformed these rodents from street menace to last resort protein. Eating rat meat wasn't common practice, but urban families facing starvation did indeed resort to capturing and cooking these widely detested animals. Rat meat required meticulous cleaning, soaking in brine or vinegar, and thorough cooking at high temperatures, usually roasted or simmered into stews heavily seasoned to disguise its origins. Historical accounts indicate that rat dinners emerged mostly from extreme necessity rather than culinary experimentation, with some cooks humorously admitting the biggest challenge was convincing diners it tasted almost like rabbit, provided they didn't think too hard about it. Naturally, health concerns arose from consuming urban rodents, notorious carriers of disease, think plague and leptospirosis, conditions more serious than indigestion after Thanksgiving dinner. These legitimate dangers pushed health authorities to unequivocally declare rat meat illegal and unsafe, permanently closing down any possibility of a rat roast revival. Modern laws reflect clear public health priorities, strictly forbidding consumption of rodents, classifying them as dangerous vermin rather than viable food sources. Split pea cakes are another example of how often peas and beans were the saving grace of American households during the Depression. The best thing about these things was arguably how easy they were to make. All you had to do was boil them, which meant that lots of people could effectively use this recipe. Some of the Depression-era recipes straight up just don't apply to people who don't have certain kitchen appliances or ovens or a steady supply of electricity. Split peas were something everyone had, from urban areas to outskirts and rural ones. It also helped that split peas worked so well with the kinds of things people already had on hand. A binder, like all-purpose flour or some mashed potatoes, was also really helpful in holding the mix together. Plus, they went great with potatoes overall. The thing is, though, and this is really important in why people chose cakes over easier meals, is because people sorely missed sweets. Thanks to the Depression, basically any item that could be used for baking or even just for a change of taste wasn't something you'd ever find anymore. It was too expensive, too costly, and it meant that people never got the desserts they grew up with. That really dampened people's spirits all year round, and peas were common enough that people could spare some for a cake once a week. Watermelon Rinsley wasn't the only one who loved a peanut butter and bacon sandwich. The combo of crispy, salty bacon and creamy, rich peanut butter created a high-protein, energy-packed sandwich that was a favorite for anyone in need of a quick and filling meal. It's easy to see why this sandwich caught on. It balanced savory and sweet, crunchy and creamy. The bacon gave it that satisfying crunch, while the peanut butter added a smooth richness. It wasn't the healthiest option, but when you're working with a tight budget and even tighter food supplies, it was a treat that gave you the energy to keep going. Not only was this a cheap meal, but it was also indulgent in a way that made you forget about how hard times really were. The combination of these two ingredients might have seemed strange, but it worked, and it worked well. But if you're craving something a little lighter, something that came before the age of bacon and peanut butter, the next sandwich on our list might be just what you need. Now we are talking classic. Corned beef and coleslaw on seeded rye is one of those sandwiches that knew how to make an entrance without raising its voice. You would find it wrapped in wax paper at your local deli, or sitting proud on a tray next to a pickle spear and a bag of chips. The corned beef was thin sliced but packed with punch, salty, tender, and just fatty enough to remind you this was not diet food. Then came the slaw. Not too creamy, not too dry, with just the right crunch to cut through the richness of the meat. Pile that high between two slices of seeded rye, sturdy, peppery, with that classic bite, and you had something special. This was the kind of sandwich that told you to sit down and take your time. It did not rush. It did not play games. It was the kind of thing you ordered when you wanted to feel like an adult, even if you were still wearing platform shoes and listening to disco on cassette. Deli counters made legends, and this one was a heavy hitter. But if corned beef was too bold for your taste, there was always its milder cousin. The pairs with olives, so it is only right to mention cream cheese and olive sandwiches next. Cream cheese was an ingredient that was already a staple in many American homes because of its popularity in desserts around the 1970s. Olives are, well, olives, and if you do not have a bottle always ready to go, you need to reevaluate your grocery shopping list for this month. Mixing the two made both substantially better, like those power-ups Iron Man gets whenever he puts on a bulkier suit. If people felt really fancy, they would put the olives on the stove for a while and have them fried. Not only was it great on its own, but people also did not stop at just frying. Both of them made for really awesome toppings on meat-based sandwiches. We would not mind seeing more olives on our plate today for sure. They are a classic we feel work in any era. Ham and banana. Exotic fruits like bananas became virtually unattainable luxuries during the economic hardships of the 1930s, prompting desperate yet brilliant substitutions from ordinary American pantries. Enter the mock banana sandwich, cleverly disguising boiled mashed parsnips sweetened with sugar and a dash of artificial banana flavoring. Parsnips, previously overlooked root vegetables that thrived in backyard gardens, found unexpected stardom in this culinary sleight of hand. Housewives quickly realized their earthy taste softened when boiled, making them surprisingly receptive to imitation fruit flavors. Banana extract, once used sparingly in desserts, was suddenly celebrated for turning humble parsnips into a believable tropical treat. It's ironic that parsnips were elevated from root cellar obscurity to sandwich fame simply because real bananas became too costly for most American tables. Historical records show these sandwiches appeared regularly in Depression-era cookbooks, praised as creative alternatives that allowed families to maintain dietary variety despite limited budgets. Of course, modern taste buds might question whether parsnips truly captured the banana experience. After all, impersonating fruit is tough business. But many Depression-era children reportedly enjoyed the illusion enough to ask for seconds. Packaged pork chops arrived wrapped in cellophane at supermarkets. Families in Depression-era America took matters and meat cleavers into their own hands. Home-slaughtered pigs without inspection weren't just rural tradition, they were economic necessity, a direct route from the backyard pig pen to dinner plates nationwide. Neighbors often gathered together, turning butchering day into a social event, perhaps the original farm-to-table movement, minus the trendy menus. Pork cuts were carefully salted, smoked, cured, or canned in cellars without official oversight, and sausages stuffed by hand provided protein all winter. Interestingly, nearly every part found a use, including rendering fat for lard or transforming scraps into sausage, a testament to Depression-era thriftiness. Yet these home-slaughtered practices carried hidden dangers. Unsupervised slaughter led to contamination risks, including trichinosis outbreaks and food poisoning incidents that pushed authorities toward regulation. Today, selling home-slaughtered pork without USDA inspection isn't just risky. It's illegal nationwide, intended to protect public health and ensure humane animal treatment standards. So the thing about Depression-era cooking was that it led people to places they never thought they'd go to. Previously, we actually discussed in detail how people started using all of the pig. What you probably didn't think was that this meant literally everything. Yes, even the feet. Pickled pig's feet were one of the best things to go for if we're talking about people who drew the short end of the stick during the Depression. Not all economic stress was equal. People that were living in urban hubs, especially the big-name states and cities, had it much better than local towns and rural populations that were struggling to keep going. These parts of the pig, often considered awful, were not sold at market rate prices, and usually were a lot cheaper than other cuts of meat. The thing with those cuts was that even if they were available, which they rarely were since they were also being rationed heavily, they'd leave quite a gap in your budget. Pickling the pig's feet with vinegar and taking advantage of its acidity meant that the meat lasted longer too, and that goes to show you how dedicated people were to getting as much use as they could out of everything they had. During the Great Depression, food scarcity pushed resourcefulness to new heights, turning even backyard weeds into life-saving nourishment. A prime example was the dandelion greens sandwich, made from tender, freshly foraged dandelion greens sautéed briefly in bacon drippings or butter, proving the old adage true: one person's weed is another person's lunch. Dandelions flourished freely, thriving on roadsides and lawns, offering a nutritious, vitamin-rich option readily available to anyone willing to forage. Interestingly, dandelions weren't always considered nuisances. Settlers historically cultivated them for their nutritional value, containing more iron and calcium than many grocery store greens today. During the Depression, families who knew this little fact relied heavily on these wild greens to fill nutritional gaps left by their otherwise sparse meals. With fats like butter or precious bacon drippings in short supply, home cooks learned to carefully ration these staples, just enough to tame the green's natural bitterness. Ironically, modern gardeners battle relentlessly against dandelions with chemicals and lawnmowers, unaware their ancestors would have gladly turned that lawn invasion into supper. Bologna and potato salad sandwiches were just as effective at getting the entire family on the table and doubling as the perfect school lunch for your kid. Grade 5 or high school, none of that mattered, because even adults well into their career enjoyed these. People working long jobs would pack a bologna and potato salad sandwich in their backpack to ensure all their food needs were met. Often you would come into a home around the afternoon and find kids glued to the TV with a bologna and potato salad sandwich in hand. Mixing in some chicken chunks or chips would only upgrade an already stellar dish, and we definitely want potato salads and this sandwich to make a comeback. Realities of the Great Depression. Families turned to pantry essentials that delivered calories and sweetness without breaking their limited budgets. Enter the humble yet hearty molasses sandwich. Thick molasses, generously drizzled onto slices of bread and occasionally sprinkled with salt, emerged as a popular lunchtime choice, not just out of necessity, but because it provided a rare moment of sweet indulgence during tough times. Molasses, a byproduct of sugar refining, was affordable and accessible, often stored in large tins kept in kitchen pantries, becoming as familiar as flour or potatoes. Resourceful Depression-era homemakers appreciated that molasses offered not only sweetness, but essential nutrients like iron, magnesium, and calcium, long before modern health experts rediscovered its hidden nutritional punch. To combat monotony, some households cleverly balanced the syrupy sweetness by adding a pinch of salt, creating a flavor combination intriguing enough to make molasses sandwiches feel like a treat rather than a compromise. In fact, molasses was such a dependable Depression staple that families jokingly called it their liquid gold, humorously acknowledging its value while dreaming of better days. Equally, ham and pineapple sandwiches, on the other hand, are a Hawaiian invention that makes some stomachs less audible. On the other hand, if you are anything like us, then maybe the blend of spices, fruits, and canned pork and ham will create a unique flavor trip for you. Spam and pineapple sandwiches in the state of Hawaii would usually be accompanied with things like mango slices or mango chutney, peppers, chili pastes, and fresh coleslaw. All of this really elevated the dish and gave it a strong identity to pull from when it was making impressions on people for the first time in the 70s, and most were good ones. While pineapples are eternally hated in America, this is one mix of different foods that a lot of citizens could get in line for, and that is why we are sad to see this one gone. An era when practicality trumped sentimentality, even the family pet wasn't always off limits as a main course. Pet rabbits for meat became common during the Great Depression, as families raised them not just for fluffy companionship, but also as a convenient dinner solution. Surprisingly tender and mild-tasting, Rabbit meat was commonly fried, stewed, or baked into pies after soaking overnight in buttermilk or vinegar to reduce gamminess, because nothing ruins a Depression-era Sunday dinner quite like unwanted backyard flavor. Raising rabbits was uniquely economical, as these fluffy companions conveniently doubled as livestock, feeding on grass and garden scraps and multiplying at legendary speeds. There's a reason we still joke about rabbits' reproductive enthusiasm today. However, attitudes toward rabbits changed dramatically in post-war America. As people increasingly viewed these long-eared animals strictly as cuddly household companions rather than dinner options, cultural taboos strengthened significantly. Modern urban zoning regulations often explicitly forbid slaughtering animals considered pets, making it not just socially questionable but legally risky to prepare rabbit dinners at home in populated areas. Parsnip bread is actually a bit more complicated than you would think. It's a root vegetable that people use as a substitute for more expensive stuff like sugar or sweeteners that they otherwise couldn't access. Now again, this was more a requirement for people who had spent their lives living in cities and were used to having additives and preservatives in everything they bought and ate, which is why they weren't used to not having sweeteners. Parsnips are actually naturally pretty sweet, and that fact only becomes a lot more apparent if you roast them or boil them. Luckily, this was one recipe that could be a lot more widespread in the country thanks to the way it didn't require any kind of kitchen appliances like ovens. No baking or anything, just plain old boiling and roasting. The ingredients were a bit of a financial barrier though, because you did need things like white flour and baking soda. People substituted that with a mixture of a little bit of white flour and whole wheat, and it worked for the most part. The sugar that people did have, they would add really sparingly. The bread would rise very well too, which meant that it was the perfect thing to go for when your bread was stale, running out, and you had nothing left to work with. People would usually enjoy parsnip bread with soups and stews, just like we do. When it comes to using leftovers in the most creative way, the spaghetti sandwich is a prime example of resourcefulness. After a hearty meal of spaghetti, rather than letting any leftover noodles go to waste, many families would stuff the cold or reheated pasta between slices of bread, creating a sandwich that was both filling and practical. The beauty of the spaghetti sandwich lay in its simplicity. There was no need for additional ingredients, just pasta and sauce on bread, and that was enough to provide sustenance. Whether it was enjoyed cold or warmed up in a skillet, this sandwich made use of what was already prepared, turning leftovers into a whole new meal. It was a quick fix for lunch or dinner when funds were tight, and cooking from scratch wasn't an option. For many, the spaghetti sandwich wasn't just a meal, it was a way to stretch food further, especially during times of scarcity. The bread helped soak up the sauce, while the pasta provided a comforting, hearty filling. It wasn't a sandwich you'd see at a fancy restaurant, but it served its purpose well, turning a simple leftover dish into a satisfying, portable meal. It's the kind of meal that may sound odd to some, but to those who lived through hard times, it was a tasty and practical solution. When you needed to fill up and didn't have time or money for anything else, the spaghetti sandwich got the job done. And if you think spaghetti on bread is a simple fix, wait until you see what's next. Chipped beef on toast, or as anyone who ever served in the military will tell you, SOS. No, not a cry for help, though it looked like one. This was dried beef, shredded and stirred into a thick, milky white sauce with a bit of pepper and sometimes a touch of Worcestershire if you were fancy. Then it got spooned over toast, or biscuits, or whatever bread you had. It was a direct descendant of World War II rations. But by the 1970s, it had made its way into American homes, school cafeterias, and greasy spoon diners across the country. It was salty. It was creamy. It looked like a mistake, but somehow it kept getting made and loved. It was affordable, filling, and tasted better than it had any right to. Parents made it because it used cheap pantry ingredients. Diners served it with coffee refills. Kids ate it because they did not know any better, then grew up craving it again. It might not be pretty, but it is unforgettable. Still, not everything on this list is heavy. Some sandwiches were just simple, clever ways to use what was left on the breakfast table, and a little sweet on the side. There is Among the unlikely culinary heroes of the Great Depression was a sandwich featuring sliced tomatoes sprinkled lightly with sugar, the tomato and sugar sandwich. Tomatoes, easy to grow and abundant in backyard gardens, were embraced as a budget-friendly food staple during hard economic times. This sandwich cleverly paired the natural acidity of ripe tomatoes with a touch of sweetness, making them appealing enough even for skeptical children. Surprisingly, sugar, though carefully rationed, was frequently recommended in 1930s homemaking guides as a versatile flavor enhancer, transforming humble ingredients into tastier meals. Newspapers even promoted tomatoes as the perfect vegetable for cash-strapped families, humorously dubbing them "poor man's oranges" due to their vibrant color and juicy interior. Combining tomatoes and sugar wasn't just a quirky experiment, it was practical ingenuity. Sweetening tomatoes masked their tartness, giving them broader culinary appeal and preventing precious produce from going to waste. Modern taste buds might initially find the concept puzzling. After all, tomato sandwiches traditionally call for mayonnaise and salt, but Depression-era cooks weren't afraid to rewrite culinary rules if it meant saving pennies. Inspector. In cities struggling through the Great Depression, hungry families frequently turned to their local waterways for sustenance, pulling dinners straight from rivers that today would make even industrial chemists hesitate. Eating fish from polluted rivers wasn't exactly gourmet dining, but it was survival cooking at its most pragmatic. Catfish, carp, and perch were typically breaded, fried, or baked with onions and potatoes to mask muddy flavors, a method that probably made diners thankful the river's taste didn't seep through too strongly. Even back then, though, residents jokingly admitted their fish dinners had a hint of motor oil, hardly a selling point, but better than going hungry. Public health warnings of the era were minimal. Pollutants like mercury, PCBs, and industrial chemicals weren't widely understood yet, leaving fishermen blissfully unaware of their toxic supper. Eventually, environmental awareness and science caught up to common sense. By the 1970s, federal laws like the Clean Water Act drastically limited fishing in contaminated waters, explicitly labeling certain rivers off-limits due to severe health risks linked to cancer and neurological disorders. Honey and cracklings were a big Southern staple, both in and outside of the Great Depression. While they were always very appreciated for the fact that it was such an inexpensive and filling meal, especially whenever money was tight, the history behind them is tied a little bit to the nature of the land itself. See, hominy is made from corn kernels, and a very specific type of kernel too. These ones are typically treated with lye or lime, and this is done so that the hulls of the kernels are removed. What this does is it makes them more digestible. Still, why does that make them such an accessible option? Well, both cracklings and hominy come from two things that are always in abundance in the South, and if you've ever been there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Pigs and corn are two things you just can't run out of up there, even if you tried. Chicharrones are things that we've already gone over. That fried pork fat is something the South can never let go of. Hominy works so well because, agriculturally speaking, the South is really good for growing corn. It's one of their top products and crops, and that hasn't changed even in the 21st century. You put two and two together, and you get the format for a meal that just won't let you down, especially when times are rough and your funds are stretched thin. Creativity in the kitchen was essential, and the cabbage and mustard sandwich was a perfect example of making the most out of minimal ingredients. Boiled cabbage, often considered a humble vegetable, was paired with a dollop of yellow mustard, creating a simple yet satisfying filling between two slices of white bread. The cabbage provided a soft, mild base, while the mustard added a tangy kick that brought everything together. It wasn't the most exciting sandwich, but it served a purpose. It stretched pennies while still providing enough sustenance to get through the day. This sandwich became a staple for many who needed something filling, affordable, and easy to prepare. While it may have been basic, it was all about keeping things regular and using what you had available. The simplicity of this meal made it a go-to for families during tough times. And though the combination of cabbage and mustard may seem unusual, it was a practical meal when other options were limited. But if you think this sandwich is a little too simple, wait until you hear about the next one, which brings a bit of sweetness to the table. Back in the 1970s, vegetarian food was still finding its groove, But the zucchini and cheese melt was one of those quiet wins tucked away in the spiral-bound cookbooks of every mom who wanted something different. Start with sliced zucchini, sautéed in a bit of butter with onions, maybe some garlic or dried herbs if you were fancy. Cook it down until it is tender and fragrant. Then pile it onto a slice of whole wheat bread and smother it in shredded cheddar. Into the oven it went, broiled until the cheese bubbled and browned at the edges. This was not a salad disguised as a sandwich. It was hearty, warm, and full of flavor. The zucchini gave it body, the cheese gave it soul, and the bread held it all together like it was born for this. You did not miss the meat. That was the surprise. It was the kind of sandwich that popped up when the fridge looked empty, but your mom still made something work. It smelled like love and tasted like something healthier than it had any right to be. And while this one kept things wholesome, the next sandwich leaned full tilt into deli classics: meat, stuffing, and a layer of post-holiday leftovers you could eat any day of the year. During the Great Depression, when times grew tough in Depression-era America, families turned to preserving foods, making homemade spreads like apple butter, a prized pantry staple. The apple butter and cheese sandwich, a modest pairing of homemade apple butter and thinly sliced cheese, became a favorite because it cleverly combined two readily available ingredients into a filling, flavorful meal. Apple butter, a concentrated sweet spread slowly simmered from bruised or imperfect apples, allowed families to make use of fruit that otherwise might have gone to waste. Apples were abundant and inexpensive during the fall harvest, so resourceful home cooks preserved them carefully to ensure supplies lasted through harsher winter months. Cheese, although slightly more precious, was often rationed in thin slices, stretching each small block to maximize meals without emptying the purse. Cookbooks of the 1930s praised apple butter sandwiches as a satisfying way to provide necessary calories cheaply, perhaps quietly suggesting they tasted better than some other thrift-driven concoctions. Not seen experimental until you have seen a tuna and apple sandwich. Exactly what it sounds like, and worse in reality than in your imagination: a tuna salad mixed with chopped apple slices on white bread. Yes, that is literally the entire concept, and no matter what the fusion food crowd tries to say, we are not trying it or buying into the hype. If only to satisfy the curiosity inside us and scratch that must-try-everything itch would we want this back. But strangely, people in the 70s had the opposite opinion. Cans of Pink Lady tuna and farmers market apples were apparently their idea of a good meal back then. Do you think they were onto something? Maybe we are jumping the gun and should take a note out of their book about being open to new tastes. Bologna. In tough economic times, resourcefulness often triumphed over squeamishness, and few dishes captured this gritty ingenuity better than the infamous roadkill stew. During the Great Depression, families faced with empty pantries saw opportunity in freshly struck animals: deer, rabbits, raccoons, lying roadside, turning these unfortunate encounters into nourishing meals. After inspection, mostly visual, food safety rules were looser back then, the carcasses were quickly skinned, cleaned, and tossed into pots bubbling with potatoes, onions, carrots, and herbs. Cookbooks from the 1930s humorously cautioned cooks to select only recently deceased creatures, advising that tire tracks were a less-than-ideal seasoning. Surprisingly, this improvised delicacy wasn't just rural folklore. City folks, too, adopted roadkill recipes as an economical alternative to expensive butcher shop meat. Today, however, collecting roadside meals has moved from economical practicality to legal controversy. Many states now strictly regulate or outright forbid harvesting roadkill, citing health hazards from bacteria, parasites, and unknown diseases, not to mention wildlife preservation laws designed to prevent poaching disguised as scavenging. Crackling cornbread is a pretty traditional Southern dish that comes right out of the family cookbooks of this decade, so that should tell you something about how much grandmas loved it. Crackling cornbread sounds a lot more climactic than it really is, though, so let's go through what makes it so crackling. Basically, they're made with chicharrones, or otherwise known as pork cracklings. These are crispy fried bits of fat that were rendered when the pork was being cooked, and they most typically come from the fatback or the skin of a pig. Now, one bit of time-specific context that's really important here is that people were using every part of the pig they could back then. Crackling cornbread was another variation of that kind of mentality where people really wanted to not let anything go to waste, especially the pig. Why was the pig so special, though? Well, unlike chickens, ducks, and even beef, the pig was the only animal that had use outside of the plate, too. You could use its bones for broths, you could use its fat for cooking, you could get lard out of it. That's what made this animal so important. And that's why so many dishes like crackling cornbread came out of the South when pigs were commonly being consumed due to the shortage of other options. Most of the lovers of chicken salad and grape sandwiches dwindled a lot over the years, and now it is just a memory. No one does comfort food better than Americans, and the iconic potato chips and cheese sandwich is proof. People would grab cheddar or mozzarella cheese and a packet of Frito-Lays or a can of Pringles and get busy at the table but not in the kitchen. Reason being, this was one of those 10-minute dishes that took absolutely no effort or time to make, like instant noodles. Barbecue-flavored chips would be preferred because they added a secondary flavor, but all kinds were used and the crunch was just to die for. In the 1970s, chips like Pringles were getting more and more popular in America, and that made it even easier for this to take center stage. What would follow in the decades after was a growing concern for health, and people stopped making their favorite potato chips and cheese sandwiches, but we would love a 70s plate. If they're offensive to most conservative taste palates, were pineapple and cheese sandwiches. As of 2024, it is a well-established fact that the West and pineapples have had a very troubled relationship. Pineapples try their best for America, and America acts like an alcoholic husband that cannot notice his wife, even on their anniversary. Back in the 70s, this was still a new culinary ground people were treading, just like ham and banana sandwiches. What they found was that it did not have the potential to go very mainstream, but it could grow itself a strong, loyal, and niche following. Most fans of this sandwich were in Hawaii, but in surrounding states, the trend took off moderately successfully. People loved the overly sweet and oddly comforting sensation of the sandwich, and we can see why. Pineapple and cheese sandwiches sound oddly delicious if you really think about it. In Depression-era kitchens, sorghum syrup quietly became a valuable pantry staple, sweetening life just enough to make tough days tolerable. Peanut butter and marshmallow fluff sandwiches, Liberty sandwiches, or fluffernutters, are basically just marshmallow cream on one bread and peanut butter on the other. Despite having like 3 legal government names, it is surprisingly a one-trick pony. But that one trick does wonders on an empty stomach, whether you needed a quick hit of sugar or a comfort snack to make the long shift pass by easier. These were just the sandwiches for the job. Fluffernutters also got really popular among children, and customizing them to make these cute aesthetic sandwiches was a popular hobby for kindergarten would-be chefs. Not something you would see on Hell's Kitchen, but something that puts a sweet smile on your day. Imagining the flavors is a bit difficult, so giving this certified beauty a shot is definitely on our list. One of the best descriptors we can offer is visualizing hot marshmallows dipped in peanut butter. And does that not sound just wonderful? Cream cheese-era kitchens, dessert leftovers found new life as inventive sandwich fillings, notably the sweet yet tangy vinegar pie filling sandwich. At first glance, the idea of vinegar pie itself might seem a culinary contradiction, but during the 1930s, it exemplified resourcefulness at its finest. Traditional fruits like apples or cherries grew scarce and pricey, compelling cooks to mimic their tart flavors using vinegar, sugar, and simple pantry staples. Homemakers discovered that leftover filling, sweet, tart, and silky, could transform plain bread slices into unexpectedly delightful sandwiches. Surprisingly, vinegar pie's popularity was well documented, featured regularly in women's magazines and cooking columns, praising the ingenuity behind making pies without fruit. Jokes circulated that vinegar pies were an acquired taste, but one gladly acquired when wallets stayed empty and stomachs demanded satisfaction. Beyond mere novelty, This filling cleverly balanced flavor profiles, providing sweetness from sugar and a satisfying tartness from vinegar, which together could fool the palate into tasting apples or lemons. Depression-era families did with canned goods without expiration dates or labels. Back then, home canning wasn't just tradition, it was an absolute lifeline, with families routinely sealing meat, vegetables, and fruits inside recycled glass jars or tins, blissfully unconcerned about pesky details like expiration dates or ingredient lists. Dinner often became a surprise mystery meat special. Moms called it creativity. Kids might have called it something else entirely. Cooks would boil these unlabeled contents vigorously, hoping to reduce health risks, though botulism remained a lurking threat even then. Ironically, food safety guidelines of that era were minimal at best, and illnesses frequently resulted from guesswork gone wrong. Eventually, federal food labeling laws and regulations emerged, driven by serious health scares linked directly to unidentified canned goods. Today, selling unlabeled or undated food isn't just unsafe, it's explicitly illegal, with strict FDA requirements on labeling and freshness dates designed to prevent illness and confusion alike. At a time when peanut butter gravy on rice is a fantastic example of how inventive people were during the Depression. See, the thing about this is that peanut butter was one of the best things you could buy during the Depression for several reasons. If the constant use of lard didn't tip you off, people were really treasuring fat wherever they could find it. Secondly, people needed as much protein as they could afford to get or forage. Peanut butter was luckily proficiently loaded in both of these things, but on top of that, it was also pretty cheap. It was one of the best sources of protein and fat within that price range. You might wonder how they got a gravy going out of this, though. Well, you'd add some water or milk, usually water, and something to thicken the gravy with, like all-purpose flour. If people could spare it, just a bit of margarine for some more richness and basic seasonings were also really helpful. You'd get somewhat of a gravy going with this, and on rice it was filling enough. Another really popular lard and salt sandwich is one of those meals that perfectly embodies the ingenuity and resilience of families during the Great Depression, when food was scarce and every penny had to stretch. It was as simple as it sounds, just bread, lard, and a generous sprinkle of salt. The lard, which was a cheap and readily available source of fat, provided the sandwich with richness and moisture, while the salt helped enhance the flavor, making it more palatable. While it may not have been fancy, the lard and salt sandwich was a practical and filling option when other food was out of reach. Bread was often the most affordable ingredient, and lard was something many households had on hand, especially those who lived on farms where pigs were raised for their meat. This sandwich wasn't about gourmet dining, it was about making do with what was available. Despite the lack of variety, it kept hunger at bay and provided some much-needed energy during a time when food options were limited. It was a meal that could be whipped up quickly and was surprisingly satisfying. Though it may seem unappealing today, the lard and salt sandwich was an essential part of survival for many families. It's a reminder of how people used their resourcefulness to make meals out of the most basic ingredients. And while lard and salt might have filled many bellies, the next sandwich on our list brings together a different combination of simple ingredients to create a surprisingly satisfying meal. Bologna and mustard was never supposed to be a star. It was just something people made when they ran out of ideas or groceries. But it had that wild card charm. Thick-cut bologna, the kind with that red plastic skin you had to peel off, got tossed on a hot skillet until it puffed like a mini volcano. It would curl at the edges, crispy and brown, and just when you thought it was done, it would start to sing. Slap that onto a slice of Wonder Bread, squeeze on yellow mustard like you mean it, and top it with another slice. No lettuce, no tomato, no distractions. This was the sandwich that knew what it was. It smelled like school lunches and weekend trips to the lake. It was cheap, easy, and always hit the spot. Nobody was trying to impress anybody with this. But somehow, it never let you down. The meat might have been humble, but it had attitude, and the mustard made sure it got noticed. Now, if that one felt like a memory, wait until we talk about the sandwich that brought the diner straight to your house, griddle grease and all. The butter and bacon sandwiches might be a little ironic considering what we just talked about, But one thing they most definitely are is downright delicious. We know you are imagining it as you watch the video, and that is okay because, honestly, same. Crispy fried strips of bacon lathered in thick peanut butter are enough to get anyone's mind going. In the 70s, peanut butter and bacon sandwiches were the standard American breakfast, and they may have even started the stereotype of the US being a nation of bacon heads. When you get to the plates of every household in 50 states, you can claim a piece of culture for yourself too. Peanut butter and bacon sandwiches remain in the Food Hall of Fame, and there was nothing like a fresh sandwich off the pan in the 70s. Spam butter and pickle sandwich, featuring crunchy peanut butter generously layered alongside sliced dill pickles, was one clever response to empty cupboards. Peanut butter surged in popularity during the 1930s, partly because it provided inexpensive protein at a fraction of the cost of meat. Pickles, meanwhile, represented resourceful preservation, allowing frugal households to stretch cucumber harvests throughout the entire year. Combining these affordable staples, home cooks found the creamy, salty peanut butter balanced perfectly with the tangy bite of dill pickles, making an oddly delicious sandwich. Notably, newspapers of the Depression era often recommended peanut butter sandwiches precisely for their nutrition, calling them a poor man's steak, while pickles added zest, vitamins, and some much-needed crunch. Though today's diners might initially raise an eyebrow at this unusual duo, peanut butter and pickle sandwiches weren't considered oddities back then. In a time desperation tightened its grip in the Great Depression, even the backyard robins and sparrows became fair game. Commonly known as songbirds, these feathered neighbors found themselves starring unwillingly in Depression-era dishes. Families employed homemade snares, nets, and carefully aimed slingshots to secure their tiny meals. Once captured, the birds, typically robins, sparrows, or blackbirds, were plucked, gutted, and roasted whole over open fires or baked with potatoes and onions into miniature pies. Interestingly, a 1930s household recipe even recommended skewering songbirds, seasoning lightly, and cooking rapidly, likely the original, less glamorous predecessor to today's fancy hors d'oeuvres. But this culinary trend, born purely of necessity rather than preference, soon faced heavy legal scrutiny. The Migratory Bird Treaty Act, established earlier but strictly enforced post-Depression, outlawed hunting, capturing, or consuming migratory songbirds to prevent their declining populations. Today, violating these regulations could result in hefty fines or even imprisonment, making songbird skewers a costly dish indeed. Beet greens with vinegar show a lot of the lifestyle choices that people were making and gravitating towards during the Depression. Simple things, filling meals, dishes that had a lot more health benefits than fancy tastes or European twists. Families were really struggling to afford just about anything meat-related, so they clutched the vegetables that were similar to it, whether that was in texture or taste, as closely as they could to their chests. They'd take beet greens from a bunch of beets and a tablespoon of vinegar. Then, some bacon grease or vegetable oil would work. If you were using fresh greens, then you would usually trim the stems and leaves. But people would even save these because you could use the leaves to sew holes in clothes or the stems for medicinal treatments. The best part about this dish was again that you could pretty much just make it over an open fire. It was a bit tricky to make because the greens were really prone to wilting as they cooked, which is naturally what happens, so people really reached out to their neighbors for once with help in how to perfect the recipe and technique. Lots of people relied on vinegar as an addition in a lot of their dishes because it helped a lot, whether it was in adding some tang and contrast to the dishes. You could also serve this dish with some beans or potatoes, and it would actually pair a lot better than you would think, especially if you were using mashed potatoes. When the budget was tight and even jam or jelly was out of reach, butter and sugar sandwiches came to the rescue. It was as simple as it sounds, a thick layer of butter spread on white bread, then topped with a generous sprinkle of sugar. For many, this became the go-to treat, especially during the Depression. It was sweet, satisfying, and didn't require much in terms of ingredients. The butter added richness, and the sugar gave it a touch of sweetness, making it feel like a real dessert, even if it was just a way to fill the stomach when times were tough. The best part? It was incredibly cheap to make, and you didn't have to go hunting for expensive ingredients. Families would often have this as a snack or even as a light dessert to end the day. Despite how simple it seems, there's something comforting about its humble sweetness. But as simple as butter and sugar may be, it's about to get even simpler with the next sandwich on our list. If you've never tried a Joe, and that is the whole point, these school cafeteria icons had one mission: to hit like a flavor bomb and leave a trail behind. Tangy ground beef cooked with tomato paste, onions, and whatever seasoning the lunch lady felt like using that day. Scooped in a steaming pile onto soft hamburger buns that were usually a little too small. You would take one bite, and the filling would slide out the other side like it was trying to escape. Your hands? Covered. Your tray? A disaster. Your smile? Huge. They were sweet, salty, savory, and just chaotic enough to make lunch feel like a party. Even the name sounded like something you should not be allowed to say in class. Sloppy Joes were not reserved for fancy moments. They were served with plastic forks and half a chocolate milk carton. But they became legendary. Maybe it was because they tasted like comfort food mixed with rebellion. Or maybe it was just the fact that no one ever got through one without needing extra napkins. Either way, it earned its place in the Sandwich Hall of Fame. But what if I told you there was a sandwich out there that combined egg, gravy, and a hamburger bun, and somehow made it work? Now, salad and bacon sandwiches had a really strong presence in the southern parts of the USA. If you remember the egg and olive sandwiches earlier on from the list, then that and this would often be mixed together. People would love putting crispy bits of bacon mixed in with egg salad that replaced the boiled eggs and sprinkling olives with many sauces. Flavorful and packed with enough to entertain you until the last bite, egg salad and bacon sandwiches worked as a breakfast or an afternoon meal or even dinner in some parts. Neighborhoods in Texas particularly loved spicing their egg salads up by making a nifty sandwich out of it, and even if the trend is now gone, we still think there is potential in the idea. Gardeners facing Depression-era hardship didn't toss away unripened tomatoes. Instead, they transformed them into simple yet surprisingly tasty sandwiches, notably the green tomato sandwich. Thinly sliced, salted green tomatoes carefully placed on buttered bread became a clever culinary solution to avoid waste when economic uncertainty made every vegetable precious. When food budgets shrank dramatically in Depression-era America, backyard creatures found themselves promoted from pests to pot roast. Among these unlikely dinner guests was the humble opossum, famously cooked into dishes such as opossum pot roast. Preparation involved meticulous attention, first soaking the meat overnight in salted water, then carefully removing excess fat before slowly roasting alongside sweet potatoes, onions, carrots, and apples. Cookbooks from that time proudly featured detailed opossum recipes, reassuring skeptical home chefs that the meat was tender, mild-flavored, and almost as good as pork, though likely no opossum ever felt flattered by the comparison. Historically significant in southern states, the opossum was even humorously honored at community possum suppers, where neighbors gathered, possibly wondering if dinner had recently visited their own porch. However, modern dining etiquette and strict wildlife regulations have largely removed opossum from American menus. Health officials today strongly advise against eating opossums due to risks of diseases like leptospirosis and parasites unaffected by standard cooking temperatures. Many states now regulate or ban trapping and consumption of these marsupials altogether, highlighting safety concerns over nostalgia. So, the thing about lard biscuits was that it was essentially too available. Lards pretty much just rendered pig fat, if you weren't familiar. Sometimes, people use cooking fat to add flavor and texture to a dish, and it helps to really make it an overall more filling meal. Now, since most of the urbanization hadn't taken place yet in America yet, and there were still loads of rural areas to go around, lard biscuits became very common. They were far more affordable than butter or oil, which is what you would usually use for your cooking if you had some spare change you didn't need to hold on to. It became such a common element of Southern cooking that it also eventually just became a tradition that people associated with the region. It's now a deeply ingrained part of American culture. Historically, biscuits were a big part of the way people lived in the South during hard times of the Depression. Leavening agents were really just the most worrisome part of the entire haul. You get baking powder and baking soda, which helps a lot in making the biscuits rise. You want your cookies fluffy, after all, not chewy and soggy. Now, the people would usually cut lard into the dry stuff, such as the flour and baking powder. Since flour was a rarity, most people used all-purpose flour. The rest was just the typical biscuit process, really. They're a lot better than you'd think, but they did cause lots of health issues over time, too. Simplicity was the answer when it came to making a meal out of what was available, and the ketchup sandwich was a prime example of that. When food was scarce and the pantry was running low, a ketchup sandwich became a quick, affordable solution. It was as simple as it sounds, just bread and ketchup. It may not seem like much, but for many families, it was a meal that could be thrown together in a matter of minutes, with nothing more than 2 slices of bread and a squeeze of ketchup. There was something comforting about the tangy sweetness of the ketchup paired with the soft, familiar bread, making it a surprisingly satisfying combination. It wasn't about fancy ingredients. It was about making the most out of what you had. If you were lucky and payday wasn't far off, you might even add a Kraft single for a little extra richness, transforming it into a cheese and ketchup sandwich. But in its most basic form, the ketchup sandwich was a testament to the resourcefulness of families making do in tough times. It was a meal that required little preparation but still filled the stomach. This sandwich wasn't about high-end flavors or ingredients. It was about stretching what little you had and getting through the day with a simple, reliable meal. And while the ketchup sandwich was straightforward, it's about to get a little more indulgent with the next sandwich, where the flavor combinations get a bit more interesting. Chili Melt was not just a sandwich, it was a lifestyle. It belonged to truck stops, corner booths, and places where the waitress calls you Hon. Start with a beef patty, not too thick, not too thin, grilled until the edges charred just enough. Then pile on caramelized onions so sweet they practically melt, and drop a couple of slices of Swiss cheese on top until it oozes over like lava. But the crown jewel? That rye bread, buttered and toasted right on the griddle, it soaked up everything. The beefy drippings, the onion sweetness, the crispy edges of the cheese. Every bite was a perfect mix of crunchy and gooey, salty and buttery. You were not just eating a sandwich, you were biting into pure diner energy. People had this at lunch and still talked about it at dinner. If your parents ever made this at home, you were one of the lucky ones. And if not, you probably still remember your first time trying one and realizing a sandwich could actually stop time. But not every sandwich needed to be hot off the grill. Some came cold, weirdly fancy, and straight from the pages of a church cookbook. Imagine being 8 years old and opening your lunchbox to find chopped olive and cream cheese on pumpernickel. Either your mom was ahead of her time, or she found an old cocktail recipe card and just went with it. This sandwich was salty, tangy, creamy, and somehow kind of grown up. You had green olives chopped. Santa sandwiches are less digestible both literally and figuratively than most of the list, but they actually worked quite well. The trick was in how you sliced them, because if the banana slices were fat and thick while the ham was thin, you would have a really overly sweet sandwich. Meanwhile, if you did the opposite, then you would have a mushy sandwich that did not have any real flavor. If you did get the proportions right, and most people did after their first few tries, then you had a 70s DIY delicacy with simple ingredients. It made sense why most people did not know how to make a good one, because it was not common. People who lived in other decades hated fruit and meat mixes of savory dishes, but they had a lot more room to make an impression with the crowd in the 70s. Maybe people felt very tropical for a decade? The sandwich would be quite an interesting addition in menus today. Equally offensive. In the humid summers of the South and Midwest during the Depression, resourceful cooks dipped ladles into bubbling pots filled with a delicacy now hidden behind a shield of wildlife protections: wild turtle soup made from snapping turtles. Highly regarded for its supposed medicinal properties, this dish combined turtle meat with vegetables and spices in a slow-cooked broth, sometimes enriched with sherry, giving it a sophisticated flair despite its humble swamp origins. Catching snapping turtles required skill and caution. These prehistoric-looking creatures packed jaws powerful enough to snap broom handles, making dinner prep almost as dangerous as it was economical. Cookbooks of the era suggested that turtle meat contained 7 distinct flavors, though skeptical diners joked it tasted mostly like swamp chicken. Overhunting and declining populations eventually forced state governments to step in, enacting strict laws and bans protecting snapping turtles from commercial harvest. Today, turtle trapping is highly regulated or illegal altogether in several states, particularly where species are considered endangered or threatened. Cowpea stew is another example of how black-eyed peas are a cultural pillar of many communities, especially the American South. It was such a common thing to see in family cookbooks, community cookbooks, and even the government pushed for people to start using more of this. Cowpea stew would typically just look like the black-eyed peas and a little bit of fat just for flavor. People used vegetables such as onions and garlic, carrots or potatoes, and then herbs like parsley and thyme. Dried black-eyed peas were also something that was not only available in bulk, but was also something that was really commonly grown throughout the South. Lots of places that had farming land or had traditions of growing their own food were living marginally better during the Depression because of how they were used to treating food the way people were starting to. Conservatively, with intention and planning, cowpea stew was actually a special dish because it was one of the few things that didn't feel like you were stretching it. Lots of the stuff on here, like potato peel soups and lard with toast, that kind of stuff really was tiring for people to eat all the time. Cowpea stew wasn't just affordable and accessible, it was delicious and healthy, which made it a real star during this entire decade. Sometimes a quick and simple solution was needed when the month's budget was running low. Enter the cold hot dog slices and ketchup sandwich. This sandwich was made with leftover hot dogs, sliced cold, and slathered with ketchup between slices of bread. It wasn't fancy, but it was cheap, easy to make, and comforting. After payday, people might have splurged on hot dogs, but by the end of the week, those leftovers would be repurposed into this quick fix. The cold hot dog slices were nothing more than a vehicle for the ketchup, but when combined with bread, it made a satisfying snack or lunch. There wasn't much finesse to it, but it worked. It might not win any culinary awards, but when you've got limited resources, you make do with what you have. And while this sandwich may seem like an odd pairing, it's definitely one you'd want to try if you're in need of a last-minute meal. However, if you're craving something a little heartier, the next sandwich might just be what you're looking for. If you were a regular at lunch counters in the 1970s, there was one cold cut that had a mysterious charm: pickle and pimento loaf. It had a look that was hard to ignore. A pale pink meat dotted with bright green pickle bits and tiny flecks of red pimento, like a mosaic made by someone who really loved sandwiches. It came sliced thin from behind the deli glass, slapped between white bread with a dab of mayonnaise, and wrapped in wax paper with a soda on the side. You did not question it. You just ate it. The flavor? Tangy, savory, and weirdly sweet, but not in a bad way. It had the texture of bologna, the bite of pickle, and the color scheme of a Christmas tree. For some reason, it vanished from most grocery shelves by the end of the decade. Maybe tastes changed, or maybe we just stopped putting pickles inside our meat. But back then, it was an easy go-to, a bit of fun, and a total conversation starter if you pulled it out during lunch break. Of course, if you thought that sandwich was messy looking, just wait until we dive into the one that was literally impossible to eat without getting sauce all over your hands and loving it. There is nothing tidy about a slop. To most conservative taste palates were pineapple and cheese sandwiches. As of 2024, it is a well-established fact that the West and pineapples have had a very troubled relationship. Pineapples try their best for America, and America acts like an alcoholic husband that cannot notice his wife even on their anniversary. Back in the 70s, this was still a new culinary ground people were treading, just like ham and banana sandwiches. What they found was that it did not have the potential to go very mainstream, but it could grow itself a strong, loyal, and niche following. Most fans of this sandwich were in Hawaii, but in surrounding states, the trend took off moderately successfully. People loved the overly sweet and oddly comforting sensation of the sandwich, and we can see why. Pineapple and cheese sandwiches sound oddly delicious if you really think about it. You have not If you've ever watched a raccoon tip over your garbage cans, you might find it hard to imagine inviting one to dinner. Yet, during the Great Depression, resourceful cooks did exactly that, preparing raccoon meat as routinely as chicken. Back then, hunting or trapping raccoons wasn't just a hobby, it was survival. Cookbooks advised carefully cleaning and soaking the meat overnight, typically in vinegar or salt water, to remove the greasy, gamey flavor before roasting it with sweet potatoes or simmering it into a hearty stew. Interestingly, raccoon was even featured prominently in community cook-offs and rural Sunday dinners, considered delicious enough to appear in popular recipes alongside pork and beef. However, the days of openly dining on raccoon meat faded with tightening health and wildlife regulations. Today, consuming raccoons is strongly discouraged or explicitly illegal in many states due to serious concerns about rabies and parasites. Wildlife agencies emphasize that raccoons, those nocturnal bandits once invited to dinner, carry diseases that cooking doesn't always eliminate. Now, you've heard of lots of kinds of different sandwiches, but a bean sandwich might be new even for us. What does it typically consist of? Well, you basically treat the beans as a spread here. The cooked beans often get mashed, and then they're mixed with seasonings and herbs to add a bit of an aromatic kick to them. Typically, people were using regional beans that were really easy to get. You know as well as I do that convenience runs in the blood of every American, my friend. Pinto beans, navy beans, and kidney beans were some of the most accessible kinds of beans around and were the easiest to get. Lots of hardship economically meant that people had no option but to rely on things like these for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but particularly breakfast. With lunch and dinner, you could still run a soup or some kind of stew and get away with it. But what did people do for breakfast? Butter and toast? Couldn't have worked. You were saving that bread for more filling options, and butter was expensive. Things like bean sandwiches were really helpful because they were a reliable go-to breakfast option that also had a lot of health benefits like protein and fiber. When times were tough and budgets were tight, the potted meat and pickle sandwich became a popular choice for many families. Potted meat, often deviled ham or canned potted meat, was an affordable and long-lasting option that could be stored on the shelf for months. It was a quick fix for lunch or dinner, providing the protein needed to get through the day without breaking the bank. The key to this sandwich was the addition of pickles, which added a sharp, tangy crunch that perfectly complemented the rich, salty meat. The pickles cut through the richness of the potted meat, bringing balance and an extra layer of flavor to the sandwich. Combined with the soft bread, it created a hearty, satisfying meal. While the sandwich might not have been gourmet, it was practical, affordable, and filling. Potted meat, though not glamorous, was a staple in many households during difficult times because of its long shelf life and low cost. The pickles, often a pantry staple, brought a much-needed contrast to the meat, giving the sandwich a bit of freshness and bite. This sandwich was a great example of how people made do with what they had, using simple ingredients to create a meal that could feed a family without breaking the bank. And while the potted meat and pickle combo served its purpose well, things are about to get a little more savory and filling with the next sandwich. This one came out of left field, unless you grew up near a Chinatown diner. The Egg Foo Young sandwich was one of those things that made 0 sense on paper, but the second you took a bite, you stopped asking questions. Start with an egg patty, crispy on the outside, soft on the inside, and packed with bean sprouts, green onions, maybe a little chopped pork or shrimp if you got the good kind. Then came the gravy. Not just poured, but drenched. Thick brown gravy ladled right over the patty until it practically dripped off the sides. Slide the whole thing into a hamburger bun, close it up, and prepare yourself for the kind of meal that laughs in the face of napkins. It was heavy, hot, and heartwarming. The Egg Foo Young sandwich felt like the kind of invention you only make when you are really hungry and just messing around in the kitchen. But in the 1970s, this was a lunchtime legend for anyone who knew where to find it. Of course, if you were not lucky enough to live near a place that served one of these, you probably grew up with something even saltier, way more military, and still showing up on diner menus today. Another creative idea that worked very well in the kitchen were olive nut sandwiches. folks started making their own spreads in the 70s in what was a wave of home cooking-oriented ideas that took America by the throat back then. All the rage was to be found in ideas that worked best at family tables, and olive nut sandwiches were a notable one from that era. Black pepper, mayo, and cream cheese blended with various kinds of nuts to make a very crunchy and earthy spread that made 2 slices of white bread look like gold. Olive nut sandwiches honestly took every ingredient that was used in them to another level. Not one participant in this dish was better on its own, and that is what references from the early to the late 70s say all around the States. Definitely a better and much more imaginative way of getting your protein intake that we want back in today's menu. Corn has long been the reliable companion of American families, especially during the economic struggles of the 1930s. Frugality in the Depression-era kitchen meant nothing was wasted. Every spoonful mattered, leading to innovative dishes like the creamed corn sandwich. This sandwich featured leftover creamed corn thickened just enough to spread between slices of bread, transforming last night's side dish into today's main event. Corn was abundant, affordable, and deeply woven into American culinary heritage, so turning leftovers into sandwiches wasn't merely thrifty, it was practical culinary genius. Homemakers quickly realized that leftover creamed corn, thickened slightly with flour or stale breadcrumbs, could yield a surprisingly tasty sandwich spread. Creamed corn sandwiches became a clever way to feed large families without extra expense, all while sneaking in essential nutrients and fiber. Historical pamphlets even encouraged homemakers to use corn creatively, describing it humorously as the vegetable that kept giving, since families would see it repeatedly at meals, sometimes more than they wished. Industriality reached extremes during the Great Depression, prompting homemakers to become amateur meat inspectors, carefully sniffing, trimming, and salvaging moldy or spoiled meat, hoping tonight's dinner wouldn't become tomorrow's medical emergency. While modern sensibilities cringe at the thought, families in dire poverty routinely carved away discolored portions, heavily seasoned questionable cuts, then cooked them at high temperatures to minimize risk, though the flavor sometimes left diners longing for less adventurous meals. Depression-era recipe books quietly hinted that spoiled meat could be resurrected by lengthy boiling or vinegar marinades, presumably on the theory that vinegar masked more sins than it absolved. Surprisingly, this wasn't entirely misguided. Boiling could neutralize some bacteria, though it did little to eliminate dangerous toxins already present. Eventually, as understanding of foodborne illnesses grew, health officials recognized consuming spoiled or moldy meat wasn't a test of toughness, but a genuine public health threat. Strict federal food safety regulations emerged, explicitly forbidding restaurants and stores from selling spoiled products and making it illegal to knowingly distribute unsafe meat. Stew isn't something you'd see anywhere today, but it was the talk of the town back in the 1930s. Watermelons, including the rind, are actually pretty wasted. People almost always throw away the rind, and very few actually try to do anything with it. Back in the 1930s, even the rind was used. The green skin on the exterior of the watermelon was something people peeled away, but they'd usually save it to make jelly or something out of it. The rind was also cut into cubes, strips, and whatever else people could find use for. The rind was then cooked and boiled until it was soft enough to be eaten, and it was also salted so that any excessive bitterness could be controlled. Once people did make the rind, they'd add it to the base of a stew that was made from some pretty hands-on ingredients. Basically whatever people had lying around. The biggest reason people wanted to use the rind was because it was like really high in water content. It could soak up any kind of seasonings because of that too, which meant that it was easy to give the rind some extra flavor. As unconventional as it was, it meant that a big fruit like a watermelon could be used entirely to maximum benefit. Takes the humble potato and turns it into something simple but delicious. Sometimes, simplicity is the best solution, and the boiled potato and butter sandwich is a perfect example. It's as basic as it gets. Boiled potatoes smashed onto bread with a generous spread of butter and a sprinkle of salt. It sounds simple, maybe even boring, but there's something about the soft, creamy texture of the potatoes combined with the richness of butter that makes this sandwich surprisingly satisfying. The potatoes were filling, cheap, and readily available, while the butter added a touch of luxury. It was the kind of meal that was comforting in its simplicity, especially when times were tough and money was tight. This sandwich was often enjoyed warm, making it all the more comforting on a cold day. And while it might not have been fancy, it tasted better than it sounds. But if you're in the mood for something a little more indulgent and messy, the next sandwich might be just what you're looking for. If you've ever had something dangerously comforting about mixing bacon grease with anything sweet, and that is exactly what bacon and apple butter on white bread was. You take crisp, salty bacon, still warm from the skillet, and press it into a slice of soft white bread that has been generously smeared with apple butter. That is it. No lettuce, no cheese, no rules. The combination was 100% homemade magic. It tasted like fall mornings, cast iron skillets, and someone's grandma telling you not to eat too fast. Apple butter gave it this rich, spiced flavor that clung to your mouth just long enough for the bacon to come crashing through. It was smoky. It was sweet. It was not trying to impress anyone. The real win here was in how it reused leftovers. If breakfast was done, and you had a few stray strips of bacon and a jar of apple butter on hand, this sandwich practically made itself. The kind of thing you whipped up while the coffee was still brewing. Maybe it never made it to a diner menu, but it made it to enough hearts to matter. And speaking of sandwiches that mattered, let us talk about the skyscraper of cold cuts that ruled every diner plate with a toothpick flag on top. The cheese and jelly sandwiches continue the trend of sweet sandwiches that add a cheesy twist to give an extra kick to your taste buds. Often sprinkled with a bit of pepper and served on toasted bread, cream cheese and jelly sandwiches worked really well as a cheap but tasty snack. That cost-effectiveness helped them become more trendy in an America that was still suffering from the Great Depression and all the havoc it wreaked. People do not close your mind off to the idea too fast, since cream cheese and jelly was one combo no one saw coming but everyone hopped on. People would usually prefer strawberry or raspberry jelly, but some would also use blackberries. No one messed with the cheese though, and cheddar was the established pick for this sandwich in the 70s. Is this something you would try? Because we think it might be a surprise you like. Eggs. At a time when pantries were sparse, one modest vegetable quietly rose to culinary prominence, notably paired with vinegar to create the onion and vinegar sandwich. Thinly sliced onions marinated in tangy vinegar with just a pinch of sugar might sound like a questionable lunch choice today, but during the Great Depression, this humble sandwich was a household staple. Vinegar, cheaply produced and easily accessible, became an indispensable tool for Depression-era cooks trying to stretch limited ingredients into flavorful meals. Onions thrived effortlessly in backyard gardens, making them abundant even when money was scarce. But onions had another appeal. Their sharp bite helped mask the taste of stale bread, a constant companion during hard economic times. Home cooks discovered that marinating onions briefly in vinegar not only mellowed their pungency, but also produced a refreshingly tart flavor, transforming the simplest sandwich into a delicacy. Remarkably, onions were so valued that Depression-era food guides suggested planting them as an emergency food supply, alongside potatoes. This sandwich perfectly encapsulated the ingenuity of an era when resourcefulness wasn't merely admirable, but essential for survival. In the leanest years of the Great Depression, nothing edible went to waste. Not even the parts most people today wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole, like boiled squirrel heads. This peculiar dish, particularly favored in southern Appalachia, involved simmering squirrel heads slowly, extracting tender meat from cheeks and even brains, both prized as delicacies rich in nutrients. Preparation required patience, typically slow-boiled with salt, onions, and herbs until the meat easily slipped off the bone, a culinary adventure often joked about as the original head-to-tail eating philosophy. Eating squirrel heads wasn't merely a quirky rural curiosity, but a necessity-driven culinary solution. During times when meat was scarce, discarding any edible part was economically unthinkable. However, modern regulations strongly discourage consuming squirrel brains, not merely because it's unsettling dinner table conversation, but due to legitimate health concerns. studies revealed a disturbing connection between squirrel brain consumption and a rare fatal neurological disorder known as Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, a cousin of the infamous mad cow disease. The popular thing to get around the time for breakfast was rye bread with lard spread. Now, lard spread was a pretty good way of using any kind of lard you had. Rye bread was also a pretty economical choice to go for because the average white bread was a little too expensive. Brown bread or rye bread were the kinds of options people were going for when they did their grocery shopping trips. Also, people who lived further away from places that were selling basic essentials and groceries also focused on rye bread for the fact that it would last longer. Little things like this really added up and made a difference in how people approached their shopping. One of the best uses of lard, outside of just using the fat for cooking, was to make a spread out of it. You might be thinking if that could really be so good, and I get where that thought comes from. Under normal, or let's say even typically bad circumstances? Probably not. It's nothing special, but in the 1930s, literally anything that added even a crumb of flavor to what you were eating was a godsend. The apple and mayo sandwich might seem like a strange combination, but it was a surprisingly popular choice during tough times when ingredients were scarce and creativity in the kitchen was key. Sliced apples, typically tart varieties, were paired with creamy mayonnaise between slices of bread. The sweetness of the apples contrasted with the rich, tangy mayo, creating a unique and unexpected flavor profile. It wasn't the type of sandwich you would find in any deli, but it became a go-to option for those looking for something quick and different. The apples, which were relatively inexpensive and often readily available, provided a bit of freshness and texture, while the mayo added a comforting creaminess that tied the whole thing together. The apple and mayo sandwich was especially popular during times of rationing or when fresh produce was hard to come by, offering a rare chance to enjoy a sweet, crunchy bite. While it wasn't a culinary masterpiece, it was a meal that worked with what was available, perfect for those on tight budgets. The sandwich wasn't fancy, but it had an undeniable charm. For many, it was an odd but delicious treat that felt like a luxury in a world where simple ingredients were used to make the most of every meal. And if you thought the apple and mayo sandwich was unexpected, just wait until the next sandwich, where another quirky combination takes center stage with a surprising flavor twist. Let's be honest, pimento cheese spread does not sound like the kind of thing that would stick with you. But in the 1970s, it did. This was the sandwich you pulled from a metal lunchbox with a thermos to match. Kraft pimento cheese came in a little glass jar, neon orange and suspiciously shiny. Spread it onto white or wheat bread, top it with a layer of sweet pickles, and what you got was a flavor combo that somehow tasted like home. The creaminess of the cheese, the vinegary bite of the pickles, and that soft bread just soaking it all in, it hit differently. No toasting, no grilling, just a cold sandwich, plain and proud. It was a sandwich that looked like it was made in 5 minutes because it probably was. But that was the whole point. It was easy, cheap, and oddly comforting. You saw it at picnics, in school bags, and on paper plates at neighborhood block parties. And while it might not be the most elegant thing on this list, it never pretended to be anything it wasn't. But if you were feeling brave or just really nostalgic, the next sandwich took a sharp left into strong flavors, bold textures, and a rye bread that meant business. Liver chips of the Great Depression, creativity in the kitchen became as vital as bread itself, leading to culinary experiments that modern taste buds might find curious. Among these unusual creations was the humble yet surprisingly refreshing cucumber and sugar sandwich. Thinly sliced cucumbers, lightly dusted with sugar, sandwiched between slices of bread. Sugar may seem extravagant for the 1930s, yet households often had small reserves carefully rationed for moments exactly like this, transforming bland cucumbers into something akin to dessert. Garden cucumbers, prolific and hardy, grew abundantly, becoming the unsung heroes of many Depression-era meals. Interestingly, cucumbers were favored because they matured rapidly, providing a dependable source of nutrition when pantry staples were uncertain. Clever homemakers discovered sprinkling sugar over cucumbers masked their watery blandness, turning a simple vegetable sandwich into an affordable treat. Even kids who usually avoided vegetables happily ate it. In fact, this unlikely pairing became popular enough to feature in homemaking pamphlets of the era, billed as a sweet sandwich children would actually finish. For American families battling tight budgets during the Great Depression, innovation became the true mother of necessity, especially when pairing unlikely pantry items like peanut butter and pickles. The peanut butter trans fats were unfortunately not just prevalent in margarine production, but many other foods like fried roll pulls as well, which meant that culling the problem all across the American nation may be more challenging than the government initially thought. Basically, if something had liquid oil becoming solid fat, it had trans fats, and that means it had a health risk worth considering. Fried roll-ups happened to be a delicious snack that many people would enjoy in their free time or when they found a stall with the fragrance of a good roll-up. Although businesses like that would suffer the same as margarine producers did when the FDA put a lid on the entire situation with trans fats, and we cannot be happier that they did. Look, it is not like we do not enjoy our fair share of fried food, but the fried roll-up pulls just had too many trans fats for something that was available readily and fast. The smoky aroma of grilled meat has been a staple of backyard cookouts for generations. But in the 1960s, few people realized that along with the rich, charred flavor came an unwanted ingredient. If you think about scrapple cakes, then you can pretty much think of them as a kind of meat pudding. It's actually fitting that we end on a foreign dish because it's exactly during the Depression that people first learned to appreciate all the different communities, cultures, and traditions that thrive within America. Specifically in Pennsylvania, where there was a large German and Dutch population, this was a popular item to make. Scrapple is typically made from minced offal and pork meat, and it's mixed with different kinds of spices and cornmeal. People also tend to add buckwheat and pork bow to make a healing and rich broth. People used to go around calling this the poor man's bacon, but I guess life has a funny way of humbling everybody, doesn't it? Those same people found themselves swearing by scrapple cakes. People found a lot of newfound appreciation for all the different kinds of meals that people who came from other places and settled in America had to offer. It was really helpful to learn recipes like these because they were a lot more resourceful and practical than most of the cookbooks that people were working with at the time. Cornmeal mush is used. Gardeners facing Depression-era hardship didn't toss away unripened tomatoes. Instead, they transformed them into simple yet surprisingly tasty sandwiches, notably the green tomato sandwich. Thinly sliced, salted green tomatoes carefully placed on buttered bread became a clever culinary solution to avoid waste when economic uncertainty made every vegetable precious. Green tomatoes were plentiful during the cooler months when fully ripe tomatoes weren't always achievable, ensuring these tangy, firm slices found their way onto many lunch plates. Remarkably, green tomatoes offered not only budget-friendly sustenance but valuable nutrients, including vitamin C, essential for families with limited access to fresh produce. Cooking columns from the 1930s enthusiastically endorsed green tomatoes as affordable, versatile pantry staples, though often jokingly acknowledging their tartness as an acquired taste. Resourceful homemakers cleverly balanced the tomatoes' acidity by spreading bread generously with butter, turning the sour slices into surprisingly palatable sandwiches. The green tomato sandwich is a vivid example of how necessity drove creativity in the kitchen, proving to skeptics everywhere that sometimes even unripe produce could shine brightly in a humble sandwich. So, the cranberry sandwich was a straight-up post-holiday miracle. For decades, it was the unsung hero of Thanksgiving leftovers. But somewhere in the 1970s, it graduated. This was no longer just a thing you threw together on Black Friday. It became a deli menu regular, a cold-cut superstar. Thinly sliced roast turkey, piled high on hearty sandwich bread, usually with a swipe of mayonnaise or stuffing if you were lucky. Then came the game changer, cranberry sauce. Not the fancy kind either. We are talking about the jiggly canned stuff that still held the shape of the tin. Spread it on thick and it brought a tart sweet punch that made the dry turkey sing. The contrast of savory meat with that jammy cranberry hit your mouth like a leftover-themed love letter. And the best part? You did not need a holiday to eat it. It was portable nostalgia, a bite-sized reminder of family dinners and paper plates stacked high. Every bite was warm, even when served cold. But if cranberry sauce and turkey were a love story, the next sandwich was more like a wild experiment that somehow worked, one that turned a jar of spread and a couple pickles into a lunchtime classic. Cannot get are chicken salad and grape sandwiches. Seriously, what was the vision here and who signed off on it? Honestly, the most action this dish saw was when it was the weekend, and there were only leftovers and some odd assortment of fruits at home. Places like Rhode Island still had a fan base for the flavors this sandwich had, especially in early 1970s, and the highlight here really was the chicken salad. Not something you would have to enter a food coma, but definitely something you want if you are counting calories. Health-wise, this was probably the best sandwich you could get back then, when the alternatives were grease-loaded behemoths or experimental train wrecks. Most of the lovers of chicken salad and grape sandwiches dwindled a lot over the years, and now it is just a memory. During the economic struggles of the 1930s, Americans learned to see value in even the humblest ingredients, leading to clever culinary combinations like the mustard and cabbage sandwich. Shredded raw cabbage tossed with spicy mustard transformed a simple vegetable into a crunchy, tangy filling that made eating on a budget more palatable, literally. Cabbage, inexpensive and incredibly durable, became a Depression-era favorite because it thrived in home gardens and could survive months in cool root cellars. Food guides frequently promoted cabbage as a cheap source of vitamins, humorously dubbing it poor man's medicine, though perhaps the medicine metaphor came partly from its powerful aroma. Pairing this everyday vegetable with mustard wasn't accidental. Spicy mustard, affordable and packed with flavor, had a unique talent for making bland foods suddenly appealing. Cookbooks of the era praised mustard as a versatile condiment, often highlighting its ability to rescue dull dishes. The pairing was smart, as the sharpness of mustard perfectly balanced the mild, crunchy cabbage. In a period marked by rapid industrialization and cost-cutting innovations, one controversial ingredient left its mark on the processed meat industry: canned pink slime meat. Emerging as a byproduct of the 1960s surge in mass-produced foods, this product was initially celebrated for its efficiency and affordability, which resonated with a public eager for convenience amid economic uncertainties. At a time when regulatory oversight was still developing, its inclusion in everyday meals proceeded with minimal scrutiny, a situation that would later prompt significant policy revisions. Although it provided an economical solution for meat processors, consumers soon discovered that the product harbored potential health risks, ranging from digestive disturbances to concerns over long-term exposure to industrial chemicals. Advertisements touted its value as an innovative way to extend meat supplies, a claim that seemed almost too good to be true once adverse health impacts came to light. As the scientific community began to unravel the full implications of ingesting such additives, regulatory agencies tightened standards and its usage was eventually curtailed in many applications. So the thing with baked onions is that they were really good, and they were definitely a perfect way to warm yourself up in the winter, but they were also very restricted. By that I mean that if you didn't have an oven, you could simply forget about using your onions this way. The best part about this is that it meant you could actually make do with 1 or 2 onions instead of using more than that, so it also let you stretch your pantry out just a bit more. However, again, this was something you would only see in urban hubs and big cities. Go over to Detroit or California, where people had pretty much bought ovens before the Depression had hit, and yeah, sure, you would find neighbors sharing baked onions and cooking something, but if you went to the other side of America, you would get a different picture. This is also a part of why families decided to migrate and live with their relatives in cities. They simply had more to work with. Sugar. The fried bologna and mustard sandwich is one of those classic comfort foods that speaks to simplicity and practicality. A true Southern favorite, this sandwich became a staple in many households during tough times when meat was scarce and budgets were tight. Bologna, a processed meat that was inexpensive and easy to find, was fried until it curled up, creating crispy, golden edges that added texture and flavor to the sandwich. The bologna's richness was perfectly complemented by a generous smear of mustard, which added a tangy zing that cut through the greasy richness of the fried meat. It wasn't a sophisticated meal, but it was satisfying, hearty, and filled you up without costing much. The best part was how easy it was to prepare. A quick fry on the stove and a spread of mustard, and you had yourself a meal in no time. The bologna was affordable and could be bought in bulk, making it a practical choice for families trying to stretch their food dollar. While it may not have been gourmet, the fried bologna and mustard sandwich provided a familiar, comforting taste that many still remember fondly today. It wasn't about fancy ingredients or elaborate cooking methods. It was about making something hearty and satisfying with what was available. And while this classic combo hits the spot, the next sandwich on our list takes another humble ingredient and turns it into something surprisingly delicious. Elvis Presley bologna is not what you would call glamorous, but in the 1970s, someone took that humble meat and turned it into a straight-up miracle. Enter the bologna pizza sandwich. This was not a joke, it was genius. You start with a soft hamburger bun, maybe left over from the weekend cookout. On the bottom half, you lay down a slice of bologna, and if you are doing it right, you give it a quick sizzle in a frying pan so the edges curl up like a little meatball. Then you spoon on tomato sauce, canned, homemade, whatever you have, and top it with shredded mozzarella. After that, into the broiler it goes. What comes out is pure nostalgia with melted cheese dripping down the sides and the edges of the bologna just crispy enough to give it bite. It smelled like school lunch and after-school cartoons. This was a sandwich that did not care what anyone thought. It was pizza-inspired, budget-friendly, and full of attitude. A little greasy? Sure. A little weird? Absolutely. But no one ever forgot their first one. But if bologna in a broiler felt like a stretch, get ready for the canned spread that showed up in lunchboxes, picnic baskets, and every pantry with a shelf of shame, and somehow stayed beloved. You knew the Depression-era kitchens. Yesterday's breakfast porridge could become today's lunch sandwich, thanks to an inventive approach known as the oatmeal patty sandwich. Resourceful homemakers combined leftover oatmeal with chopped onion and simple seasonings, shaping them into patties fried crisp in skillets. While oatmeal today is primarily breakfast food, during the 1930s, it was promoted as an affordable pantry essential, stretching limited budgets due to its low cost and nutritional value. Housewives jokingly remarked oatmeal's versatility was unmatched. It could feed you at dawn, reappear at noon, and somehow still taste different each time. Historical cooking guides enthusiastically recommended oatmeal patties as mock meat alternatives, cleverly imitating sausage texture without the expense of actual meat. Adding onions, readily available from backyard gardens or root cellars, provided flavor and depth, elevating simple oatmeal from bland necessity into something surprisingly satisfying. Once crisped in a skillet, these patties became sandwich-ready, easily slipped between slices of bread and served hot, making oatmeal suddenly exciting, words rarely uttered together. By the 1960s, soda had become more than just a refreshing treat. It was a cultural icon. With its bold flavors, flashy advertisements, and promises of instant energy, it was a staple of American life. But some brands took that last promise a little too far. High-caffeine soda wasn't just about a quick pick-me-up. Some of these carbonated concoctions packed as much caffeine as several cups of coffee in a single bottle. At a time when regulations were still catching up to the booming food and beverage industry, caffeine content wasn't something most consumers thought to question. For those needing an extra boost, whether for a long shift, a late-night study session, or just to keep up with the fast pace of modern life, these sodas were a tempting choice. But what went down easy didn't always sit well. Excessive caffeine consumption could lead to heart palpitations, anxiety, and even dependency. Some drinkers learned the hard way that too much of a good thing wasn't always a good thing. As research into caffeine's effects grew, regulations tightened. Today, sodas still contain caffeine, but the extreme levels once found in certain brands have been curbed. Have you ever heard about coffee soup? Sounds like a fever dream, right? Yet that's exactly what it is. A soup made with coffee. As offensive to your familiar taste buds as that sounds, hear me out. You take some coffee, scraps of bread, and sometimes mineral or brown sugar and milk, and then you'd brew the coffee. Then you'd mix in those pieces of bread in the hot coffee and add whatever sweeteners and spices you had, and that was pretty much that. They call it a soup, but in practice it's more like coffee with extra steps, really. Still, it was a far better use of your cup of joe than just drinking it plainly. This way, you could get carbs in the form of bread, some much-needed glucose from sugar to help keep your brain running, you got your daily hit of caffeine, and the spices would help keep you active. People didn't look at food the same way we did back then, which is why some of these dishes might seem really outlandish to you. We look at food and think about pleasure, fulfillment, and what suits our tastes. They'd look at food and think about sustenance and practicality. How much can we get out of this? What can we get out of this? That kind of thinking led to people trying things we'd never think of today. A raw onion sandwich, it's one of those meals that'll stick with you, for better or worse. Sliced raw onions, slathered with a bit of mustard or mayo, tucked between two slices of bread. It wasn't gourmet, but it was a working man's lunch that packed a punch. Onions were cheap, easy to store, and filled you up. The mustard or mayo added some tang and creaminess, but the star of the show was the onion. Not only was it a strong-flavored, inexpensive option, but it was also a great way to keep your hunger at bay until your next meal. Though its pungent scent often lingered long after the meal was finished, it didn't matter when food was scarce. For many families, raw onion sandwiches were a quick fix that provided the sustenance they needed to get through the day. But if you think this is as bold as it gets, just wait until you hear about the next sandwich roll, and calling it lunch. The taco-inspired ground beef sandwich was a bold, brilliant mess of spicy ground beef seasoned with chili powder, cumin, and whatever was on hand. This was the 70s after all. If it came in a seasoning packet, it was probably fair game. The meat got piled high into a soft hoagie roll, topped with shredded cheddar, crisp lettuce, and sometimes a few sad tomatoes trying to keep up. Every bite was an explosion of salty heat and melty cheese. It was not clean, it was not elegant, but it was delicious. This was comfort food that was borrowed from the taco truck before taco trucks were even a thing. You could find it at school cafeterias, mom-and-pop diners, and even in the occasional backyard cookout where somebody decided to get creative. The bread soaked up all that seasoned grease, and somehow it just worked. You were not going to win any awards for presentation, but your taste buds would be too busy partying to care. And speaking of comfort food with attitude, the next sandwich on our list came straight from the king himself, and probably your aunt's frying pan. Bleak economic landscape of the 1930s, the trusty carrot, often abundant and dirt cheap, was quietly elevated from supporting actor in stews to star ingredient in sandwich spreads like the carrot marmalade sandwich. Homemade carrot marmalade spread generously over stale bread might sound peculiar today, but during the Great Depression, it showcased a brilliant combination of thriftiness and culinary creativity. When sugar became scarce and costly, innovative homemakers cleverly utilized carrots' natural sweetness, simmering them slowly into a thick, jammy preserve to mimic traditional fruit marmalade. Notably, carrots were among the most reliably available vegetables during the Depression. Their hardiness meant nearly anyone could cultivate a patch, even with limited gardening skills. Families often had surplus carrots, providing an ideal solution to the era's pervasive hunger. To avoid waste, stale bread, previously destined for the compost heap, was refreshed by this sweet and slightly tangy marmalade, transforming it into an unexpectedly pleasant treat. Despite its humble origins, carrot marmalade gained popularity, prompting home economists of the time to distribute official recipes for this vitamin-packed, budget-friendly spread. During the Great Depression, when pantry shelves often looked emptier than politicians' promises, resourceful cooks headed into the woods, turning nature's mystery produce into dinner. Unregulated foraged mushrooms became commonplace, not from gourmet preference, but simple necessity. Families plucked mushrooms indiscriminately, often without knowing a morel from a death cap, and tossed them confidently into stews or skillets, sautéing them with butter or bacon fat. Old cookbooks optimistically advised, "When in doubt, boil twice." a questionable method that unfortunately didn't neutralize deadly toxins. Despite countless accidental poisonings, mushroom foraging surged in popularity, with amateur gatherers picking anything remotely edible-looking, sometimes proving that bravery and culinary wisdom don't always go hand in hand. By the mid-20th century, authorities took action, heavily restricting mushroom foraging in public parks and forests. Today, selling wild-foraged mushrooms without certification is outright illegal in many states, enforced through strict permitting systems intended to protect public health. Imagine rummaging through a pantry full of unlabeled jars, playing culinary roulette with tonight's dinner. Exactly what many Vinegar pie is something that's been around for a while, but it was also a dish that really saw a sky-high increase in public affection throughout the Depression. Remember how I was just talking about the way people really didn't get any kind of sweets during the Depression? It was rough. I meant that people never ever got things for celebrations. Many birthdays were spent without cakes, many holidays were spent without any decorations or sweets, and whenever people had a sugar craving or just genuinely did need sugar, not even as a craving like their body literally needed it, they could never access it. Vinegar pie, on the other hand, was tangy, but also sweet. It was a unique dessert that teetered on the edge of being a proper sweet while still being affordable and simple enough that just about anyone could make it without worrying. Vinegar pie goes all the way back to the early 19th century, but it resurfaced right around the 1930s as a part of mock food culture. People wanted to mimic the way lemon pie tasted, and I honestly think they got pretty close. Would you ever try giving this unorthodox pie a fair shot? Ham and banana sandwiches are less digestible both literally and figuratively than most of the list, but they actually worked quite well. The trick was in how you sliced them, because if the banana slices were fat and thick while the ham was thin, you would have a really overly sweet sandwich. Meanwhile, if you did the opposite, then you would have a mushy sandwich that did not have any real flavor. If you did get the proportions right, and most people did after their first few tries, then you had a 70s DIY delicacy with simple ingredients. It made sense why most people did not know how to make a good one, because it was not common. People who lived in other decades hated fruit and meat mixes of savory dishes, but they had a lot more room to make an impression with the crowd in the 70s. Maybe people felt very tropical for a decade? The sandwich would be quite an interesting addition in menus today. Throughout the hardships of the Great Depression, creativity in the kitchen became as vital as bread itself, leading to culinary experiments that modern taste buds might find curious. Among these unusual creations was the humble yet surprisingly refreshing cucumber and sugar sandwich. Thinly sliced cucumbers, lightly dusted with sugar, sandwiched between slices of bread. Sugar may seem extravagant for the 1930s, yet households often had small reserves carefully rationed for moments exactly like this, transforming bland cucumbers into something akin to dessert. Garden cucumbers, prolific and hardy, grew abundantly, becoming the unsung heroes of many Depression-era meals. Interestingly, cucumbers were favored because they matured rapidly, providing a dependable source of nutrition when pantry staples were uncertain. Clever homemakers discovered sprinkling sugar over cucumbers masked their watery blandness, turning a simple vegetable sandwich into an affordable treat. Even kids who usually avoided vegetables happily ate it. In fact, this unlikely pairing became popular enough to feature in homemaking pamphlets of the era, billed as a sweet sandwich children would actually finish. Speaking of meaty sandwiches, the Turkey Club sandwich was another fan favorite. Now, this one was known for its 3 layers of bread, which made it stand out from the rest of the sandwiches on the table. The club sandwich has its roots in American culinary history, with some sources suggesting it was first served in private social clubs in the late 19th century. By the time Grandma was making them, it had already become the talk of the town. Graham often made this one the day after Thanksgiving when there was no shortage of leftover roast turkey in the refrigerator. The key ingredient in this sandwich was crispy bacon, which Graham added to make it kid-friendly and 10 times more delicious. Grandma's Turkey Club sandwich was often cut in quarters or halves, which made it easier to eat, and this was the first time sandwiches were cut diagonally. And remember the toothpicks Graham used to hold it together with colorful cellophane frills? Brings back memories, doesn't it? When eggs became scarce during the Depression, Americans discovered a sandwich that cleverly defied logic: an eggless. When grape jelly teamed up with bologna during the Depression, the combination created more than confusion. It birthed an unexpectedly beloved sandwich: the bologna and jelly sandwich. At first glance, pairing thinly sliced, inexpensive bologna meat with sweet grape jelly might seem like a culinary accident, but in the context of 1930s America, it was nothing short of brilliant ingenuity. Bologna was a Depression staple because it stretched meat budgets further than any cut of beef or pork ever could, appearing in kitchens nationwide as the quintessential poor man's steak. Similarly, grape jelly, often homemade from wild or backyard grapes, offered a cheap, sweet contrast readily available in most households. The salty, savory taste of bologna unexpectedly complemented jelly's sweetness, creating a sandwich quirky enough to please even skeptical palates. Interestingly, early cooking pamphlets and newspapers occasionally endorsed this odd pairing, promoting it as a practical yet flavorful way to diversify Depression-era diets. Far from being merely an oddity, this sandwich underscores how cleverly resourceful our grandparents were, turning modest ingredients into sandwiches both memorable and satisfying. Preserving meat was crucial when refrigeration wasn't an option, so Depression-era families turned to unpasteurized home-canned meats, a kitchen practice that involved cooking meat cuts, placing them in reused glass jars, then sealing tightly with wax or rudimentary lids. Housewives proudly displayed pantry shelves stocked with jars filled with pork, beef, or chicken, simmered simply in their own juices, offering a reliable meal source during the harshest months. Although economical, this preservation method was essentially playing culinary roulette. Without pressure cookers, botulism thrived unseen, sometimes delivering more than families bargained for at dinner. After all, homemade pickles were tasty, paralysis not so much. In fact, botulism outbreaks from improperly canned meats contributed significantly to the establishment of strict federal regulations mandating pressure canning and pasteurization to safeguard consumers. By mid-century, labels, expiration dates, and government oversight replaced wax seals and guesswork, legally forbidding unpasteurized home-canned meats from commercial sale and strongly discouraging them domestically. Beet greens with vinegar show a lot of the lifestyle choices that people were making and gravitating towards during the Depression. Simple things, filling meals, dishes that had a lot more health benefits than fancy tastes or European twists. Families were really struggling to afford just about anything meat-related, so they clutched the vegetables that were similar to it, whether that was in texture or taste, as closely as they could to their chests. They'd take beet greens from a bunch of beets and a tablespoon of vinegar. Then, some bacon grease or vegetable oil would work. If you were using fresh greens, then you would usually trim the stems and leaves. But people would even save these because you could use the leaves to sew holes in clothes or the stems for medicinal treatments. The best part about this dish was again that you could pretty much just make it over an open fire. It was a bit tricky to make because the greens were really prone to wilting as they cooked, which is naturally what happens, so people really reached out to their neighbors for once with help in how to perfect the recipe and technique. Lots of people relied on vinegar as an addition in a lot of their dishes because it helped a lot, whether it was in adding some tang and contrast to the dishes. You could also serve this dish with some beans or potatoes, and it would actually pair a lot better than you would think, especially if you were using mashed potatoes. Sliced bananas with mayo on white bread. This banana and mayonnaise sandwich is a bit of a wild card for sure, but keep an open mind because the South definitely does, which is where this interesting creation finds its origins. Typically, a lot of comfort food comes out of the southern USA. As you may have guessed, preparing this is as simple as taking candy from a toddler. Now I know what you're thinking. Bananas and mayo sounds worse than water and oil. However, there's a reason it comes into comfort food. All you need is a sliced banana, 2 slices of fresh bread, and a good spread of mayo. Maybe not the best you'll ever have, but what's the downside? Give this forgotten experiment a try and see if it's up your alley. During the grew tough in Depression-era America, families turned to preserving foods, making homemade spreads like apple butter, a prized pantry staple. The apple butter and cheese sandwich, a modest pairing of homemade apple butter and thinly sliced cheese, became a favorite because it cleverly combined two readily available ingredients into a filling, flavorful meal. Apple butter, a concentrated sweet spread slowly simmered from bruised or imperfect apples, allowed families to make use of fruit that otherwise might have gone to waste. Apples were abundant and inexpensive during the fall harvest, so resourceful home cooks preserved them carefully to ensure supplies lasted through harsher winter months. Cheese, although slightly more precious, was often rationed in thin slices, stretching each small block to maximize meals without emptying the purse. Cookbooks of the 1930s praised apple butter sandwiches as a satisfying way to provide necessary calories cheaply, perhaps quietly suggesting they tasted better than some other thrift-driven concoctions. And cheese sandwiches were sandwiches that you could pull out of the refrigerator and have nobody raising any eyebrows, only happy smiles and eager stomachs. Bologna spreads were not too popular in America until the 70s, when they first properly started picking up some steam. People got on the bandwagon once bologna and pepperoni pizzas started becoming regular takeout options in states like New York and Chicago. If it works on a pizza, by the laws of nature, it must be tried on a sandwich or burger too. We are not sure who came up with that rule of thumb, but they were really onto something, because this made for a great sandwich that was a meal people ate when all there was for dinner was sleep. While a lot of those cheeses and spreads got discontinued now, we would love to try an authentic sandwich from the 70s because it sounds right up our alley. Remember what chilly days at Graham's called for back in the day? If you guessed hot turkey sandwich, you're absolutely right. This sandwich was another one of Grandma's delicious ways of using up leftover turkey from Thanksgiving. This sandwich featured slices of tender turkey served hot, often open-faced, with a generous ladle of rich, savory gravy poured over the top. Sounds delicious, right? Grandma made her hot turkey sandwich special with the gravy. Whether she made it from scratch with turkey drippings or used a trusted recipe, the rich gravy soaked into the bread, making each bite juicy and flavorful. She knew that nothing went to waste, and the hot turkey sandwich was a delicious way to make the most of those leftovers. The very last item on our list is candy cigarettes, which you should not mix up with candy-flavored cigarettes. These were actual candies that were shaped like cigarettes and made out of sugar, chocolate, and bubble gum wrapped in edible paper. They had powdered sugar lacing the wrapper too, which made it possible for the user to puff a cloud out, but instead of smoke, it would be sugar. The entire product was meant to imitate the experience of a smoke and hopefully work as a crutch to help people quit, but it only had the opposite effect. Many critics thought it was making children numb to cigarettes, increasing their curiosity in the substance, and causing those who already have smokers in the home to be more likely to try it. There was a lot of controversy surrounding these candies, and it did not help that they were marketed so similar to cigarette brands. All in all, not a good look for a product aimed at kids. Eventually, they were banned as part of the efforts to eradicate smoking. And we gotta say, there are a few things in history America has been as thorough about weeding out as its brief fling with smoking. Usually made with water or milk, and is a type of pudding or porridge depending on the needs of the meal. This became incredibly widespread in the southeastern and eastern bits of America, and it makes sense given how much wartime rations were consumed there. When the government would hand those out, they would often make a point to lower sugar usage and use molasses to conserve other ingredients, so people would pair cornmeal mush along with them. Mush is a more accurate term since it does kind of land somewhere in the middle ground between a pudding and a porridge. It has the consistency of the latter, but it gels and sets like the former, which gives it a slightly airy texture too. Did you know it would not be cooked in milk though? That was set after the mush was prepared to cool it down. When you think of popcorn, the Dust Bowl era is probably the last thing that comes to mind. Popcorn is the comfort food of the movie theaters, but believe it or not, they were still all the rage back in the 30s when options were limited. During the Dust Bowl, these crunchy snacks took on a whole new role. Yes, they paired popcorn with milk back then, and it became the combo of our dreams. When milk was available, it was poured over freshly popped popcorn to turn the snack into a whole meal. Milk was scarce, so it wasn't always available, but when it was, this meal was everyone's go-to. Popcorn was a cheap and easily accessible grain, and milk, if you were lucky enough to have some, added a bit of protein and calcium. It might not be your first choice for a fancy dinner, but it was a clever way to make do with what was available. Reliable companion of American families, especially during the economic struggles of the 1930s. Frugality in the Depression-era kitchen meant nothing was wasted. Every spoonful mattered, leading to innovative dishes like the creamed corn sandwich. This sandwich featured leftover creamed corn thickened just enough to spread between slices of bread, transforming last night's side dish into today's main event. Corn was abundant, affordable, and deeply woven into American culinary heritage, so turning leftovers into sandwiches wasn't merely thrifty, it was practical culinary genius. Homemakers quickly realized that leftover creamed corn, thickened slightly with flour or stale breadcrumbs, could yield a surprisingly tasty sandwich spread. Creamed corn sandwiches became a clever way to feed large families without extra expense, all while sneaking in essential nutrients and fiber. Historical pamphlets even encouraged homemakers to use corn creatively, describing it humorously as the vegetable that kept giving, since families would see it repeatedly at meals, sometimes more than they wished. The bacon and bologna and cheese sandwiches were sandwiches that you could pull out of the refrigerator and have nobody raising any eyebrows, only happy smiles and eager stomachs. Bologna spreads were not too popular in America until the 70s when they first properly started picking up some steam. People got on the bandwagon once bologna and pepperoni pizzas started becoming regular takeout options in states like New York and Chicago. If it works on a pizza by the laws of nature, it must be tried on a sandwich or burger too. We are not sure who came up with that rule of thumb, but they were really onto something, because this made for a great sandwich that was a meal people ate when all there was for dinner was sleep. While a lot of those cheeses and spreads got discontinued now, we would love to try an authentic sandwich from the 70s because it sounds right up our alley. Which 1930s survival dish would you bring back to your kitchen? Drop your grandmother's Depression-era recipes and memories in the comments. Hit like and subscribe so you never miss more forgotten flavors from American history.